I consider myself, I guess, a modernist working in the traditions of cinematic realism. So my films are interested in form as much or maybe more than sort of content. I like telling stories, but in ways that I hope surprise audiences. How else would I characterize my films? They're cast typically with non-professionals or actors who are new to the screen. So I audition at area schools, community centers, I do a lot of street casting, and sort of often build a project around the people that I've assembled. Location is really important, which is one of the reasons that I continue to work in Baltimore. I'm really inspired by sort of geography and the sense of place there. So Baltimore is definitely a character in my films. I guess I'm a regional filmmaker in that respect. So I've made 3 features, as Bill said, and my first I wrote in 2000 and shot in 2001. Edited myself and wasn't able to release until like 2006. And I learned a lot with that film. It's called Hamilton. We shot on 16 and exhibited the same format. At the time, there were still, at least at the time we shot, there were still festivals playing standard 16. That's less the case now. But since we didn't finish till 2006 and the running time was only 65, it was a real challenge to get that film out in the world. But we did, and we played some festivals, and we had a New York run in Anthology Film Archives, and through that got access to some New York press, and that sort of expanded the life of the film and made it a little easier for me to try and make my next, which was a feature called Putty Hill, which we released in 2011. Hamilton was featured a young ensemble cast, diverse in age and ethnicity, but was like entirely scripted. We were working from maybe a 50, 60-page screenplay. Putty Hill was just a 5-page treatment on paper when we went into production. And Hamilton was shot, I guess, for about 40 grand over 21 days, again on standard 16. Putty Hill was shot for 15 over 12 days. And again, we just had this roadmap in place and a number of people and places we wanted to see. So it was much more improvisational work, and I learned a lot from that, that I was able to carry forward to my third feature, I Used to Be Darker, which just premiered at Sundance and then followed with an international premiere at Berlin and will be released by Strand in the fall. And that, again, was a feature script, a collaboration, my first collaboration with a screenwriter. I'm actually a fiction writer, new to the screen, named Amy Belk. But even though we were working, from a script, we built a lot of the scenes, a lot of the dialogue. We had the freedom to kind of work very collaboratively with the actors, and I don't think I would have been able to do that, have the courage to do that if I hadn't had the experience of making Putty Hill first. Hamilton was like an attempt to tell a story with as little dialogue as possible, kind of wordlessly. It was almost like a silent film, or at least that's the way I conceived it. Not silent because there are the sound of summer was a big source of inspiration for me and something I wanted to capture and depict in the film. But I just wasn't interested in sort of a lot of talking. It's a hot summer film and about a bunch of teenagers who are just kind of wandering around and failing to communicate. And, the source material, I guess, for the film was William Faulkner's Light in August, or at least the first third, where Lena's looking, she's pregnant looking for her baby's father. So I borrowed that search narrative anyway, and that kind of gets the ball rolling, so to speak. So maybe we can look at the beginning and then talk about it a little bit. The principal actors were from the Performing Arts School in Baltimore, the Baltimore School for the Arts. And they were really great, though I learned that you know, it was a challenge to write dialogue, expect them to adhere to it, and then deliver it with some degree of emotional authenticity. And that's one of the reasons why I think I strayed from scripting the dialogue in Putty Hill, because of some of my frustration.
Get in? Yeah, I think so. Will you find me something to write with? Thank you. Here.
So I was 23 when I wrote this, and I totally naive, and I wrote 3 animals, a cat and 2 dogs, and a baby into the script. It worked out, but it was definitely a challenge I set myself up for. I did pre-visualize everything, like that was like my tactic going into this, to try to like really storyboard and create shot lists so that I was, shooting with the edit in mind. This was my first collaboration with DP Jeremy Saunier, who I continue to work with. He shot all 3 of my features. And he has a lot more experience, although most of it is in the commercial world, on set than I do. And so he was often, able to help me get around sort of sticky situations in terms of coverage. But I don't like a lot of traditional coverage. In other words, I tend to, favor a scene playing out in duration in kind of a wide shot or a master. And relying on coverage only if we kind of don't get the performance in the master. So there's something a little theatrical about that technique, and it does create a distance between the camera and the subject, and consequently the subject and the audience. But I like that. I like that space, that distance. I think it implies a kind of respect and is important for me to maintain. I also just think, in terms of performance, when you're working with non-professionals in particular, it's really valuable to have people interact with a location and perform an action in real time. I find that when you break a scene into elements for coverage or various angles, and you repeat an action or a bit of dialogue over and over again, the performance tends not to improve. I think you really need to work with professional actors who have screen experience if you're going to place the demands on a lot of coverage on them. So that's sort of the practical reason that I favor these wide shots. I should say that after Hamilton, I did begin work on another feature script about a group of high school metalheads, kind of a coming-of-age tale called Metal Gods, and I was really set on making that. We were working towards a shoot date of July 2009, but because of the economic crisis, and it was my second feature and a bit more expensive than Hamilton and ambitious, I couldn't really pull the financing together. But I received a grant from IFP, the Independent Film Project, in the form of a camera rental. And it was that camera rental that we used to make Putty Hill. So I had this feature script, and I'd begun casting it. I saw over 400 auditions in the Baltimore area over the course of, I guess, 6 months. And, people I had in mind for this film, Metal Gods. But I saw so many, just awesome kids, mostly kids, because it was a sort of a young ensemble cast again, that I wanted to work with, that when we decided to switch gears, because it was clear we couldn't make this film, realize Metal Gods at this time, I built the scenario for Putty Hill around the people that I'd met and some particular places I had in mind. Where's the, let's see, I can show you the scenario for Putty Hill quickly. This was it, just 5 pages. The sort of formal device that we wanted to attempt with this film that I think is like what people identify when they sort of talk about it as an amalgam of techniques of documentary and fiction, were talking head interviews that break the narrative. They're sort of part and parcel of the film in a unique way, though, in that a character, one of the characters in the ensemble, will leave the fictive world of the film and sit down and begin an interview with an off-screen interlocutor who's me, and then break the interview and go back into the fictive world of the film. So they're seamless in a way, which is something I hadn't really seen before. It's not like they're intercut. So I can show you an example. That for me was where the interest lay, in really suggesting that the boundaries between documentary and fiction are kind of less clear, I think, than we assume. So this film is fiction in that it's about a bunch of people who have gathered in the days before the funeral of a young man from a heroin overdose. That kid doesn't exist, but all the actors assembled are performing essentially as versions of themselves. Some of their relationships in real life have been upheld for the screen. Some were collectively imagined, but this collaborative imagination that we all kind of drew upon is sort of what built, I guess, the body of the film. So 15 locations, 12 days. There are about 8 interviews, and then they sort of fall away in the last third of the film. I gave everybody like a short biography of Corey, of this fictional dead kid. It's about 2 paragraphs. And so I talked a little bit about him. And then, we'd sit down together, the cast and I, and talk a little bit about, their character's relationship to him. And then they'd often have questions, questions sometimes about other characters, other people that appeared in the film. What do we have? Yep, 23. And these are all the sort of principal characters: Kathy, Marina, James, so you understand who his siblings are. They're all featured in the film. Spike is featured in the film. The one actor that we cast who was sort of outside the Baltimore area was Sky Ferreira, who's like a singer-songwriter, aspiring pop star, who lives now in New York but was in LA at the time. So we had to kind of build into the construct this idea that she was from someplace else, so we made her from Santa Monica, coming to visit her, coming for the funeral but staying with her father who's estranged, who she hasn't seen in a while. So I'd give them this, and then we would talk about it, and typically we'd block the scene first, and then for camera, and then Jeremy would begin, my cinematographer would begin lighting, and then I'd just talk to the actors some more and work with them in the space, and we begin to sort of together think about what might be said in the scene, and then we'd try it a few times.
The story of Putty Hill evolves, and nothing in particular really happens in Putty Hill.
Yeah.
But the development of the story is completely on an emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, was that in the writing? Was that something you discovered in the performances, or something you assembled in the edit?
I think that really, the second and third, I think that it was just a sort of a shell on paper, and in a way, this dead kid on paper was kind of performing as a MacGuffin, to borrow Hitchcock's phrase. It was like this, empty device. But the actors were able to fill it with emotion by drawing on their own experience, which I encouraged. I mean, almost everyone in the film had lost someone, many to drugs, so this was relatable. And yeah, the emotion came through the performance. And in certain scenes, the penultimate scene, for example, we never see the funeral, but we see the characters gathered for the wake following the funeral, and it's a karaoke wake at a bar. And, this combination of like mourning, but celebration of a life lived and song has real emotional content and resonance as well. But that scene was really shaped, and emotional through lines and connections were built by Mark Vives, my editor, and putting it all together, because it was just hours and hours of footage of people singing karaoke and characters entering and connecting with each other and then moving around into different parts of the bar. So I could show you that scene, which doesn't feature an interview at all. Maybe we'll just look at a character sort of slide into an interview, and then I can show you the karaoke wake.
I'm out.
Is your first time playing paintball?
Very first time playing paintball.
Did you like it?
Liked it a little.
Who are you playing against?
Saw my brother's friend.
Did you get any hits in?
A few. Me and this one guy were dueling it out behind cover. Cover, fire, shoot, cover, fire, shoot. It was fun. Most of the people out there were better than me. More ack.
Where's your brother?
My brother died about a week ago.
Sorry. When's the funeral?
Tomorrow. I got invited here by his friends.
Do you have any other brothers and sisters?
I have two sisters, Marina and Zoe. Zoe lives in Delaware. Marina lives with my mom. She's about 5 or 6.
Are you close with them?
Zoe I've been real close to, but Marina I'm just starting to get close to. She really doesn't understand the whole funeral thing.
Have you been to funerals before?
3 actually.
It's a lot. What are you doing the rest of the day?
Go home, take a shower, play games, work on my book.
You writing a book?
Yeah.
What's it about?
Vampires, you'd have to read it to really understand. It's kind of hard to explain.
Where do you go when you die?
It's wherever God decides to put you. It's not really my question.
Where's your brother gonna go?
No idea yet. You get out?
Huh?
You get out?
Yeah.
So all the characters that you meet in the course of the film come back at the end here.
I once was lost, but now All right, let's give it up for Jim on that one. Let's give Kathy that very, very much. I think she's got a few words she wants to say.
Hello.
We can cut that off.
Uh-oh. Hey, baby. That's Boogie.
That's Biscuit's song.
Huh?
That's Biscuit's song.
What song? What's your song? Come on, sing it.
Oh, that's...
You can do it.
She's not singing. She's going to do the yours.
I just want to thank everyone. And I know it was really tough at the end for Corey. And I want to thank everyone who was there for him at the end. And but we love you, Corey. I want to thank everyone for coming.
Justin's going to say something also.
I just wanted to say he was a really good guy and he would have done anything for anyone when he wasn't doing bad. I really miss him. I just can't believe he's gone. I don't know what to say.
All right, would anybody else like to say anything at this time?
My name's Joe, and I've known Corey and his family for a few years, and they've come through a lot of hard times. I watched Corey grow up before his sister was born, and he's had a lot of rough times, along with his mom and his dad. He died too young, and I'm sorry. Kathy, my regrets. Love him. You guys take care. Anybody else?
Would anybody else like to say anything at this time?
Hey, then let's get the party going, play the music, and hey,
We can get that.
we remember Corey. He's there, he's in a good place, man, and he's not suffering. He don't have no pain. So we're gonna take this to the limit. You know what he would want us to do. Let's get down.
Someday, when you grow lonely, your heart will break. Like mine, you'll want me only after you've gone, after you've gone away. After I'm gone, wayfaring stranger, we're traveling through this way I'll go. If there's no sea, there's total danger in that bright world to which I go. That is all I'm taking with me.
Yeah, I mean, the whole reason I guess I decided to write a karaoke scene into the film was because I wanted Sky to sing karaoke. That was just the sort of original seed, because we'd cast her. And then I met that guy, Joe, Dancing Joe, at a bar, this bar called The Rendezvous, not where we shot. And he came in and he put R&B on the jukebox and started dancing like that in the middle of the night. And I was like, I couldn't believe him, and started talking to him right away. And so built him into the scene. And then we brought all the, the principal actors in, Sky, her dad, who's got the long blonde hair, Cody with the little beard, Dustin, who delivers the second eulogy, Corey's mom, who delivers the first, his brother, who is the first interview that you just saw. But we also invited the locals from this bar, Dimitri's, in a neighborhood called Hamden, and we didn't know who was going to show up. The MC is this guy Bob, who does a regular Friday and Saturday nights there, and I'd been going there and singing karaoke for a couple years, so I knew him well. And he brought out all the people that like to come on the weekends, except we got there at 6 a.m. and beer was flowing. We set up the camera on like one axis and like all the action on the other, two tables. We put our principals in kind of like in place, and then we just started letting people choose their songs, and we went all day. I mean, most of the cast was drunk by noon. But some interesting things happened, like the take of the eulogy that Kathy delivers was the first, and none of the locals knew what was happening. They really believed that it was a funeral party. I didn't tell them. It wasn't like to be conniving or tricky. I just didn't think. I was too busy, and I was like, all right, they'll figure it out. But they didn't know, and so when she gets up there, they think she's getting up there to sing, and then she delivers a eulogy, and everybody reacts, and like that guy that gets up and goes over and hugs her was like really responding emotionally in the moment to this scene. It was remarkable. And then, of course, right after that take, I was like, everybody, here's the story. There's nobody that's died. We're just here imagining this. And everybody's, heart lightened a little. But there was a general mood that I think, an emotion in this space, as we were all sort of imagining this young man's life lost too soon, that feels very real and I think comes across on screen. The other production note I'll mention is just that, the scene now, in the version that we released, begins with that rendition of Amazing Grace. But kind of one of the other key ingredients from conception was this guy Biscuit, who's a regular at the bar, sings an incredible version of the Stones' Wild Horses, and that was one of the first things we shot, and that opened the scene. And we played festivals with this version and everything. It's so good, so heartbreaking. But when it came time for release, we couldn't, we tried everything and we couldn't even get a quote from ASCAP. So we had to go back in 1 year later and recreate the production design and the lighting and find someone to sing something public domain. And we spent a whole day in this bar. We didn't bring in the whole cast because we only needed a couple heads really to sort of pepper the scene to simulate a continuity. And finally, after lunch, this guy wandered in off the street and did this killer Amazing Grace, and we lucked out. And it works, but the original version is even better. Yes?
I didn't see Hill, so I'm curious about the transition from Hamilton, where you spoke about the long take and you're interested in the wide shot, to here, which has lots of discontinuities. And
yeah.
What took place? And then my second question is, you also advocated the interface between nonfiction and fiction. And I haven't seen the rest. Do you identify who's asking the questions in the film itself, or is that a seamless, omniscient voice that's asking?
The latter, really. We never identify the interlocutor, and it's me, but an audience wouldn't necessarily know that. My editor, Mark, sort of like to speak about it as sort of the voice of the film or of the frame, and I kind of like that idea too, but it's never identified. And for the most part, he's not omniscient, I guess, because he doesn't like know the story, he kind of pieces it together, but there is some like accumulation of knowledge over the course of the film. Like sometimes the questioner will know some things, have gained knowledge in between interviews that the audience hasn't. So there's sometimes little leaps in his knowledge. It's sort of disconcerting, I think, for some audiences, but it's never identified. It just wasn't really important to me. And to answer your first question, I think the big difference was shooting digitally for Putty Hill. We still had to keep a kind of economy in mind, but for these big group scenes, and there are maybe 3 of these scenes throughout the film, we took a more kind of documentary reportage style of camera work because there was so much unfolding, and my DP did a really great job just like trying to capture the action in the moment. In this case, I was like crawling around on the floor, cueing actors and stuff underneath the frame. There are 2 other scenes that use a similar approach, but on display is still that same, for the more fictive scenes, that same kind of dedication to space and duration, at least in the interiors throughout the film. And in my most recent film, that's, I think, we take a similar approach a little more akin to Hamilton, maybe. And this film is about a couple who are parents and musicians who are separating. And they have a daughter who's 18, home from her first year of college, studying theater in New York. And mom is like moving out of the house that they all lived in, that their daughter Abby grew up in, leaving Bill, her husband, and sort of in the very day that she's packing and like taking the last of her stuff, her niece from Northern Ireland drops on their doorstep. So it's this little intimate family portrait. But none of the actors had been in a film before, though the 2 leads are musicians in real life. We cast Ned Oldham, Will Oldham's brother, and a musician from Cincinnati, Kim Taylor, and then 2 young women who come from like theater families but had never acted, at least in a film. So I can show you the trailer for that and perhaps the scene, and then we can talk some more.
Hurts me to think of how you look at me. You uprooted me and left me to burn.
There's an element that breaks the narrative that's a bit like the interviews in Putty Hill in this picture. And it's the performances, principally of the two leads, the husband and wife, though we break form for a couple other performances throughout. And these play out, again, in duration. We kind of let these songs that were original songs that Ned Oldham and Kim Taylor had written, we'd kind of written the script with them in mind. They sort of felt like they had narrative resonance and carried emotional weight and communicated things that the characters weren't able to communicate to one another. So there are these like 4 uninterrupted performances in the film that I like. I think something a little different than I've seen. So one of the things that's like in every one of my movies, pools, characters hanging out in pools. That's in each of my films. Lawn mowing is in each of my films, and people, actually not in this film, but I usually write someone breaking into a house and climbing through the window in each of my films.
Hang on, the video isn't up.
So in addition to this Skype scene, there's also a couple speakerphone conversations and an answering machine message that plays important. So I made it a priority to try to like shoot them in such a way that we made, maintained fidelity. So this is like a real Skype. Her Irish brother is like, Northern Irish brother is like 2 floors down. The answering machine message was phoned in. The speakerphone conversations, she was like really calling people who were on the other end. And I think that adds a lot for, to the performance. I just think these are all ways, just like letting an actor interact with a space and have an action play out, that uphold a kind of integrity and continuity of performance. So I try to do that as much as possible, and the results are usually fun. Like if we'd faked it, we wouldn't have gotten that feedback, which I think adds to the scene. So yeah, this film should be released in theaters in the fall and on DVD and VOD, and hope you get a chance to see it. Yeah, I went to NYU and I was frustrated there. I didn't finish, I dropped out with the sort of dominant strain of narrative filmmaking. I was more interested in stuff that I was seeing, traditions of the avant-garde and more experimental personal film at Anthology and MoMA and Walter Reed and Millennium Film Center. I don't know, I guess I just feel that sometimes we connect better with the characters and maybe the core of, or the heart of the world of a film when we're like repeatedly kind of taken out of it and then have to re-enter. It's a more active way of participating for an audience that I like to encourage, that I appreciate when I'm sitting in an audience. I don't really want a passive experience. And there are ways to achieve that, letting things play out longer maybe than people are comfortable with. Will sometimes jar an audience or take someone, a moviegoer, back into their head. And that's an experience I like as a moviegoer. Or, by a simple jump cut or a jarring transition, we kind of feel ourselves removed and have to re-enter, and I think that's like a nice space to be in. I prefer that to like feeling, captive or manipulated. There's a way in which I can appreciate sort of seeing the machinations behind the film when I think they're, in the service of thought and letting me think, when they're releasing a little bit of control while still holding the reins, type of thing, if that makes sense. I don't know what it is about Baltimore. I think it's just, it still holds a lot of mystery for me personally. I think that's what it is. I mean, I could, you know, there are specific things I appreciate about it, but I don't think they're unique to Baltimore. I mean, they're true of any sort of second-tier post-industrial city, you know, the sort of, it's a very literal amalgam of North and South on the Mason-Dixon. That's something we can say. So it's stratified along lines of race and class, and it's divided, and there's a way in which those divisions make kind of communication really essential, and if we're communicating through our art, then it feels vital somehow, you know, for me to practice there. There's a strong arts community. There's the maritime tradition, you know, we're on the water, and that is inspiring sort of visually in certain ways for me. There's a diversity of sort of flora. It's like geographically a really diverse state, Maryland. But I think the people, you know, there's just, maybe it's just because I've spent so much time there, and it's my home, and I know it well, and I've gotten to look around and live a little, that, you know, I have the space to sort of notice things and the time to that I might not have when, you know, if I lived in New York right now. You know, when I moved back to Baltimore after school and living in Manhattan or in Brooklyn for a few years, I found, like, I was writing all, you know, when I was still in New York, I was writing all these stories that took place in Baltimore, because it was just like, you know, my visual memory was just full of images from my hometown. So, yeah, it continues to inspire. And, you know, the themes that sort of, I think, interest me, themes of family, of, you know, people trying to assert their creative lives in the face of obstacles, balancing their sort of work life and their daily life, dealing with the sort of the urban reality while seeking sort of solace in the more pastoral places. All those things are very possible for me to explore in Baltimore, I guess. For Putty Hill, I guess everyone I cast I'd gotten to know originally through the audition process, for the most part, unless I met them at like a bar or somewhere informally. If I'd met them through an audition, then they'd, you know, I'd seen them read and spoken to them once with the camera on them, gone back, looked at their audition tape, called them in again, did the same thing. Then I would probably call them in for sort of a group read. And this is, we were at the time reading the script Metal Gods, so there was more material there for them to kind of work with. And then we'd improvise a little. And I was far enough along in that process that I'd like begun offering people roles, and we begun talking about that when we would shoot, again, Metal Gods. And when I cast somebody, an important part of it for me is just like spending time with them, first on kind of like neutral ground, but then going to visit them in a place where they're really comfortable, so usually in their home or something, or like a park that they frequent. And so I taught kindergarten for a few years, and I learned that, like, you know, when you have a new student about to enter the classroom, you go visit them at home. It's like their home visit is one of the first things you do in the beginning of the year, before the beginning of the year. And so I kind of I put that principle, that idea in practice when I'm casting. I'll go hang out at people's homes and get to know them, their family, that sort of thing. And so that's an important part of the sort of preparatory process for me. So when we switched gears really fast, we didn't have like we couldn't allot any time for rehearsal really on Putty Hill. But I'd gotten to know everyone. I'd asked them enough questions that when we did the interviews, you know, I was asking them questions I already knew the answers to for the most part, sorry. If they were questions about Corey, there was like a certain narrative logic that we'd agreed upon that we had to uphold. But if they were questions that I was expecting them to kind of answer as themselves, for the most part, I knew the answers, so I could kind of lead the the interview that way, and they were willing to take risks and be honest. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of time for rehearsal there. It was more just about taking the time to earn the actor's trust, which is, I think, the most important thing you can do. It's very essential to me. I've known Jeremy, we went to summer camp, like a YMCA summer camp together, and when we were like 13. And I knew he was making films at that time. I wasn't, but he was doing like gory horror pics with like his friends about zombies and stuff. And then we sort of lost touch through high school. And then we're reunited. He was a year ahead of me at NYU. I was like, there he was suddenly in one of my classes. It was so cool to connect with him and see that he was studying film. I was studying film. And he was directing a lot, but was a really talented DP, and he shot one of my student films. And it was, 4 or 5 years later before I was ready to make Hamilton, but I invited him on to DP, and we've been working together ever since, and I hope we continue to work together. I mean, we have a real shorthand, like, we have a very similar eye. We work extremely efficiently on what are like kind of really short, tight production schedules. He's a very gifted lighting cinematographer, and I'm interested in naturalism, so he's able to kind of like, combine natural light with artificial light in a way that is very beautiful, but also, I think, subtle and realistic, upholds the realism of the scene. He really appreciates the locations and the cast that I choose, and I allow him a lot of freedom. We usually just spend maybe 2 or 3 days, either a couple weeks before or maybe just a week before principal photography, going through all the locations together. I don't storyboard now, but I'll usually take still photos, and then he'll come with his still camera or maybe a director's viewfinder, and we walk through and talk about what lenses we might use, and if there's, we try to flag then if there's any problems with a particular location, and sometimes there are, and we have to make a quick switch. But yeah, he's incredibly hardworking. He was the camera operator as well on Darker. I mean, for each of my films, but on Darker the whole thing is handheld, whereas my first 2 films are all on sticks. So it was his idea. He was like, I want to really shoot with the Arri Alexa, and I want to shoot 2.35. And I was like, well, that's really wide. I'm worried it's going to be too cold or austere. And he was like, well, I'll handhold it. So he handheld the whole thing, and some of those shots are really long. It's just like, he's a beast. So, yeah, he's amazing. He's like really funny and easy to work with, and just a couple years older than me. And yeah, we just, there's never any tension. It's always just like, we look at a scene, we get excited. And, he's really good at like the stuff that I'm not. Like sometimes if we do have to go in for coverage and like, my mind I start to get dizzy, particularly about like eye lines and the way things are gonna cut. He's really able to like, he's quick and can retain that stuff really, really quickly. So I can always turn to him if I'm confused about where an actor should be looking or something like that, or placed in the frame.
Fantastic.
I'm happy to continue the conversation outside. Thank you.